Good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of our virtual staff devotions. I hope you're doing well. This morning we'll be in Mark chapter 9, verses 14 through 29. So let's read this together. Obviously, this is about Jesus healing a boy with an unclean spirit. And when they came to the disciples, they saw a great crowd around them and scribes arguing with them. And immediately all the crowd, when they saw him, were greatly amazed and ran up to him and greeted him. And he asked them, "What were you arguing about with them?" And someone from the crowd answered him, "Teacher, I brought my son to you, for he has a spirit that makes him mute, and whenever it seizes him, it throws him down, and he foams and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. So I asked your disciples to cast it out, and they weren't able." And he answered them, "O faithless generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him to me." And they brought the boy to him, and when the spirit saw him, immediately it convulsed the boy, and he fell on the ground and rolled about, foaming at the mouth. And Jesus asked his father, "How long has this been happening to him?" He said, "From childhood. And it is often cast him into fire and into water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us." And Jesus said to him, "If you can, all things are possible for the one who believes." Immediately the father of the child cried out and said, "I believe, help my unbelief." And when Jesus saw that a crowd came running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, "You mute and deaf spirit, I command you, come out of him and never enter him." And after crying out and convulsing him terribly, it came out. And the boy was like a corpse, so that most of them said, "He's dead." But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he arose. And when he had entered the house, his disciples asked him privately, "Why couldn't we cast it out?" And he said to them, "This kind cannot be driven out by anything." So this is a really fascinating story. Jesus has just been on the top of the high mountain with Peter, James, and John. He comes down off of the mountain into the valley. He meets the other 9 disciples as they are sort of in this awkward situation where they've been attempting to cast this demon out and they've been unable. And Jesus learns of the situation and he jumps right in and he teaches everyone who's around a lesson on faith and what faith is. So I'd like for us to take a closer look at some of the main characters in this drama, because I have a feeling that we would probably identify with at least one or maybe more. Okay? So the first main character that we meet is the helpless son. And this kid is completely helpless. We don't know much about him, but we do know that he is obviously oppressed by some form of demonic presence. The father realizes this, the disciples realize this, Jesus realizes this, and the source of all this boy's struggles comes from the demonic spirit. The demonic spirit is causing the boy to lose his hearing and his ability to speak, and then probably most dangerously, he's causing the boy to experience these epileptic seizures. And the father understands that this demon is actually trying to kill his son because these seizures tend to happen near water or open fires. And so this father brings his helpless son to Jesus for healing. Now imagine this kid, he can't hear, he can't speak, he often falls into these convulsive seizures, and he is the absolute picture of helplessness. And to a certain degree, I can't help but see myself in him. Obviously not completely, but there are times when I feel helpless as well, specifically as it relates to my kids, honestly. I want to be there for them. I want to protect them physically. I want them to come to know the Lord, and love the Lord, and serve the Lord with their lives. But ultimately, I can't protect them all the time physically, and I can't create that relationship with God for them. That's something that God has to do in their hearts, and I feel a little bit helpless. And the good news from this story is that for those who are helpless, Jesus is the one that we need. The second group of main characters is the disciples, and they are powerless, and it's actually kind of crazy because, I mean, they've been with Jesus for years. They've seen Jesus cast out numerous demons. And not only that, but they've participated in this ministry. In fact, 3 chapters earlier, Mark mentions in chapter 6, verse 13, that the disciples themselves went around village to village casting out demons. So this is not new to them. They've done this before, and yet for some reason they find themselves unable to cast the demon out of this helpless child. And Jesus points out the fact that their inability is due to their lack of faith. When he makes that comment, "O faithless generation, how long am I to be with you," etc., he's not talking about the scribes. He's not talking about the crowds or the Father. He's actually pointing his finger at the disciples. So the source of their powerlessness is actually their unbelief. In fact, at the end of the story, when they ask him, why weren't we able to cast it out? Jesus reminds them, well, certain things can only be done through prayer. So again, if you had just trusted the Father and prayed to him, then this child may have been delivered. But the disciples feel powerless because of their lack of faith. And I don't know about you, but for me personally, I've definitely experienced that in my own life, where in times of doubt and struggles, I don't feel like I have it. There's mornings when I wake up and I'm tired and I'm not feeling 100%. And I have to remind myself it's at times like those when, in my weakness, Christ's strength is made perfect. So if you find yourself feeling powerless this morning, take heart, because Jesus is there for you and he's the one that you truly need. Third, we meet the hopeless father. I mean, this guy starts off well. He obviously believes that Jesus is able to heal his son, at least initially. But then once he sees the disciples and their struggle to cast the demon out, he himself begins to doubt whether Jesus will even be able to help his son. And he finds himself in hopeless despair. I can't even imagine what this guy must be going through. He's heard about Jesus' healing ministry, and yet the disciples are unable to help him. His hopelessness leads to unbelief, and this is clear when he says to Jesus, "If you can help us, then please show compassion." And Jesus uses the man's very own words and says, wait a second, if you can, all things are possible to the one who believes. And the man makes this fascinating statement, Lord, I do believe, but I need you to help my unbelief. So this man is being open and honest with the Messiah. He confesses his unbelief and his need for greater faith, and he goes to the one person who is able to give him more faith, and that is Jesus Christ himself. So I wonder, when we feel hopeless, are we able to admit that? Or are we the kind of people who feel like we have to give the appearance that our life is in order and we have everything together? Where do you feel hopeless this morning? Maybe you feel hopeless in your relationship with your spouse or your kids. Maybe you feel hopeless when it comes to your students. Maybe you feel hopeless in your church. Maybe you feel hopeless about the future, your own health. There's many ways that our hopelessness can kind of creep into our minds and lead us to doubt the goodness of God. And it's at times like those when we can run to Jesus and realize that he is the solution for our hopelessness. And that leads us to him. He is the faultless Messiah. He walks right up to this boy who is helpless, and he speaks to the demon, casts him out immediately. He raises the boy up. Everyone thinks the kid is dead. He's lying there motionless, and Jesus walks over and grabs his hand and lifts him up, and the boy's health is perfectly restored, which teaches us that Jesus, the faultless Messiah, is help for the helpless. And so if you're feeling helpless this morning, I've got good news for you. Jesus is the help that you need. Not only that, but if you're feeling hopeless, He is hope for you. This father certainly felt hopeless. He was at his lowest point, fearing the worst for his son. And Jesus arrives on the scene and he calms the man down and he provides for the man what no one else could. And he restores the man's hope and his faith in the Messiah. And then finally, Jesus is strength for the powerless. So if you feel inadequate, when it comes to these recordings or distance education, the virtual classroom, you feel like, how in the world am I going to figure all this stuff out? Just know that his strength is made perfect in our weakness, and he can give you the strength that you need to make it through this difficult time and whatever he has in store for you in the future. Because really, Jesus is the only one that we need. So no matter where you're at this morning, run to Jesus and find in him everything that you need to make today a success. I hope you have a great day today. May the Lord richly bless you and your family and your ministry. God bless. Have a great day.